Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, back today with another Omnibus review, and it's been a little while since I put one of these videos out. It's been tough finding the time to kind of sit down and just do one of these reviews, but here we've got a book that I've waited a long time for. I've had this for about a week now, and it's one that I had to make the time to kind of sit down and do a review on, because we're talking obviously about the Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5, as I say, very long awaited by me and by many other X-Men Omnibus collectors, I'm sure, because this is, in many ways, this is the big one. This is kind of the one that almost finishes it all, really, you could say, because this is the book that's bridging that gap for what felt like a long time, that gap between Uncanny X-Men Volume 4 and the Mutant Massacre Omnibus, because with this book here now, it means that the entirety of Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men run has now been collected in oversized format, which is just pretty amazing to finally be able to say. But let's take a look at the book itself then. Let's jump into that and see what we've actually got in here. We've got the cover here, this being the standard variant cover, iconic cover to issue 200. The Trial of Magneto issue, just a classic story, a really key story in the whole saga of Uncanny X-Men from this era. Really very much a turning point in this series. I will talk a little bit about it kind of as we go through the book. But there was a DM variant cover as well, which is the cover to, I think it's issue 205, it's the Barry Windsor Smith cover with Wolverine kind of all wired up to a machine. But yeah, looking around the spine, obviously we've got this new spine design with that small font. I know that people still dislike that. It doesn't bother me so much anymore, I'm used to it. On the back, of course, you get the cover gallery of everything that's collected in here, and it is quite a big chunk of material. Just taking a look at that bit down there, feel free to pause and have a look at the issues, but basically this, obviously picks up right after Uncanny Volume 4, and it stops immediately before the Mutant Massacre Omnibus. So yeah, just fills in that gap perfectly. It's a really great book to finally have. On the hardcover itself, quite a plain design really, nothing too amazing on here. We've got the Uncanny X-Men logo, of course. Spine is the same as on the dust jacket. I really do like this image down here of kind of the whole team. I think that's a nice image to use. And then the X logo on the back there. So we'll dive into the book here. I'll give a little spoiler warning, because I'm not going to get too heavy on spoilers here, or at least I'm not going to try to. But I will discuss some key things. In particular, I think that issue 200 really is a standout issue, a key issue in terms of the plot of what goes on in this book and setting up things that come after this. So I will touch on that a bit, but I won't go in, break it down issue by issue or anything like that. Jumping into the book, so we're getting, Chris Claremont, of course, the main writer in here. Anne Nocenti being the other main one, because she wrote the 6-issue long-shot miniseries that's collected in this book and is a very good inclusion to have in here. The main pencil that we're going to see is John Romita Jr. Dave Cockrum did come back, obviously the co-creator of this series, the Uncanny era of the series, I should say. But yeah, John Romita Jr. really the main artist doing the bulk of the issues, with a lot of the inks for his artwork being by Dan Green. But you can see there are a bunch of other names, including Arthur Adams, Rick Leonardi, Barry Windsor Smith, of course, who did contribute some really good stuff in here as well. Here we've got the contents page then, breaking it all down issue by issue. Just get a good view there of exactly what's going on in this book, what we've got. So we're going from Uncanny issue 194 to 209, plus annuals and Nightcrawler and Longshot miniseries. There's an introduction here by Chris Claremont. By Claremont standards, this is a really short introduction. This is from 2019, so fairly recent. And then we jump right in, and as I say, it's just one of those books that it almost feels a bit surreal, a little bit hard to believe that I finally have this one now. It really was just one that I was really waiting on for a long time, and it's something that I might even stake the claim that, for me, I almost feel like I could stop collecting X-Men omnibuses now. The main goal for me with X-Men omnibuses was always try and get as much of the Claremont run as possible, and now that it's basically all collected, yeah, I feel like that is a massive collecting goal achieved for me. Now, I do have, other X-Men omnibuses that are, separate to the Claremont run, of course, and chances are I will buy more. But hopefully you get my point. This just feels like it's a significant goal achieved. And there's some really fun issues in here as well. I will say that, it's not my favourite era of Claremont's X-Men. The stuff in here, there are some standout issues, this being a really good example of that. The Life Death 2. So the first Life Death issue is collected in Volume 4. That is, I can't remember the issue number off the top of my head, but 180 something. And then here, 198, we've got the second Life Death issue. The significant thing about these two issues is they were illustrated by Barry Windsor Smith in this absolutely kind of beautiful style. And both the issues focus on Storm. So Storm, during this era, she was depowered as of the result of something that happened during Volume 4, related to Forge, and she's kind of having an identity crisis. She's struggling to find her, worth and her identity and all that in the aftermath of that. She's dealing with, for the first time in her adult life without powers. But it suffice to say, she's still a badass. She still does some very great things, and of course, probably not much of a spoiler to say that ultimately down the line she does, of course, get her powers back again. So it is interesting to read that kind of these issues where she doesn't have her powers. It's certainly an interesting development for that character. I liked it. There is a little bit of double dipping here with some content from the New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2. This New Mutants Special Edition being a key example of that. I mean, this is actually the DM variant cover of New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2, but this is a really good story. It's illustrated by Arthur Adams, whose artwork is basically always great. I'm a big fan of Adams. And in here, this issue, no exception, just absolutely beautiful artwork in here. I've kind of already talked about this when I talked about the New Mutants, that second omnibus collecting their series, so I won't kind of go into all this in too much detail again, but it's a really fun story, taking the X-Men and the New Mutant teams into Asgardian lore. They get kind of caught up in all that, and it is a good story. It's a fun story. It's also where Danny Moonstar becomes a Valkyrie. I really love the New Mutants. I'm at risk of kind of going off on a tangent here and just talking about the New Mutants, but really good story there. Really good to have it collected in here because, of course, it does cross over with the X-Men, so it is relevant to their story as well. Right, here we go, issue 200 then. So a really significant issue, as I say, a turning point in the history of Uncanny X-Men. So this is the issue where, without going into too much of the specifics, basically Magneto is put on trial for his crimes up to that point. There's a nice recap that takes you right back to the very beginning with X-Men #1 here, that first appearance of the team and of Magneto, and you basically get a lot of recounting of their encounters with him ever since, and a lot of the villainous stuff that he's done over the years. He's being held accountable here, put on trial. And as a result of what happens in this issue, two key things occur. So regarding Magneto himself, he makes the decision that he wants to try and turn over a new leaf. So for a significant amount of time after this issue, we get Magneto as a good guy, or at least doing his best to be a good guy. It's not quite like a switch just flips and he's instantly good and flawless. He kind of struggles with trying to be a good guy and to adapt to that role, but he's doing that primarily because Professor Xavier leaves. So he leaves Earth at the end of this issue. He goes off with Lilandra of the Shi'ar, and he asks Magneto to basically fill in for him, to look after the X-Men, to take over his position as head of the Xavier School. And so that is what happens. From 201 onwards, Magneto is in charge. He kind of struggles to build any kind of bond with the X-Men. They are, justifiably very suspicious of him, don't really trust him. So what really happens is he ends up looking after the New Mutants a lot more so than he does anything with the X-Men. But yeah, Professor Xavier, absent from this series for about 80 issues from this stage onwards, from about 201 to, maybe not 80 issues, about 75 issues. Issue 275-ish is when he would come back into the story again regularly. But that's a lot of issues, 75 issues, let's call it 75, without Professor X, the head of the X-Men, the founder of the X-Men, really being in the X-Men series at all. He does appear now and then, minor appearances, but he's largely absent for a big chunk of time. So that issue is a really significant one. It's a good story in its own right, and it really sets up a change in status quo of this series as well. So definitely a classic one, and that's kind of why I had to go for that option as the cover for this omnibus, because it is such a, as I say, such a significant issue in the whole series, the whole story. But yeah, so we get the Nightcrawler miniseries, a 4-issue miniseries in here. And think, yeah, these are pages, of course, from, it is issue 205, isn't it? Yeah, another Barry Windsor Smith illustrated issue. And he never really did a lot of comics, you know, certainly not a lot of X-Men comics, so the ones that are illustrated by him kind of stand out as being, well, I keep using the word, but significant, you know, because that's what this is. It's a really, just a really cool issue, this one. It's the Weapon X issue. So, you know, very obviously focused on Wolverine, but great story. Just kind of skip through a few more of this because conscious of the fact that I could talk about this potentially all day if I don't kind of speed things up a little bit, but there's a great cover, nice Jaws homage, Nightcrawler issue 2. And really cool to see Dave Cockrum, like I say, return to the, not so much the series, but at least return to one of the characters that he co-created, you know, one of the very significant characters in Nightcrawler. And it's a very kind of fun story overall. It's a swashbuckling adventure, very much suited to Nightcrawler's character. It's been quite a while since I read it though, so it's something that, you know, as is often the case, as I flick through a big thick book like this, there's material in here that it's been a good while since I read, and I kind of find myself just sort of staring at it again, remembering things, but also thinking, you know, I really need to reread this. You know, that's a key thought. The Long Shot series, very good. Arthur Adams pencils this, so we get 6 issues of Arthur Adams artwork, and this is a very cool thing to include because Longshot, I mean, he's a bit of a weird character to be honest, but he just kind of shows up in the team. You know, if you don't read this series, he's just kind of suddenly in the team in Uncanny X-Men. So yeah, a good idea to read this. A good inclusion, pretty much a necessary inclusion. But again, something I think I've only read it once, the Longshot series, and that's years ago, so don't remember too much of it, need to reread it, but the Arthur Adams artwork is very good. You know, it's just got such a cool style, one of those artists with a very unique style, at least I think so. Always good to see his artwork, basically. Yeah, and then this is going to go up to, like I say, just short of the Mutant Massacre Omnibus. In terms of kind of ranking this book, I don't really want to do a specific ranking of all X-Men books, but I will say that I do prefer, for me, out of the 5 Uncanny X-Men omnibuses, if we ignore the stuff that comes after this, all the event omnibuses and the Claremont and Lee stuff, which is all obviously well worth mentioning, but if I were to just talk about the 5 Uncanny volumes, for me, I think volumes 2 and 3 are always going to be my favourite. There's just such an amazing amount of high quality stuff in there. They just set such a high bar, but the stuff in 1, 4 and 5, you know, it's all great. And I've said before, you know, Claremont's X-Men is one of my favourite runs. It's very, very much up there for me, top 5 easily in terms of all-time favourite runs, which is why I say, you know, just to touch on it again, I feel like such a great collecting goal has been achieved for me personally now by getting this book and having basically all of that Claremont run now collected in omnibus format. There's a lot of cool extras in the back, quite a chunky extra section. So a lot of the usual sort of stuff. It's all good to see. A lot of Arthur Adams artwork in here. You know, that's fantastic to see. A lot of his pencils. Then there's like other original bits of artwork, character designs, costume designs. Yeah, like some really cool sort of scripting stuff here as well. Really good book. You know, it's something that I probably don't need to tell you. If it's something that you're interested in, chances are, you know, you've probably already got this book. I'm kind of late to the party with, I think I got it after a lot of other people, and I'm sure plenty of other people have put a review upon this already now, but yeah, it kind of goes without saying, if you're an X-Men omnibus collector, you're probably going to get this book. It is very much a book that's just, it's got to be collected, really. You know, if you're interested in this run, then this is a book that I don't see why you wouldn't get it. It's a great book to finally have. Really happy that Marvel finally released it. It took long enough, I'll tell you that, because I got volume 1 and 2 back in 2016. That wasn't the first printing of those books, but probably the second or third printing. Then I got volumes 3, 4 and now 5 as they came out. So it's taken 7 years for me personally to get these 5 volumes, and I know that some people have been waiting even longer than that with the earlier printings of volumes 1 and 2. So I'm sure I can, you know, speak for myself and others when I say it's about time we finally got this. But finally, you know, better late than never. So thanks as always for watching this, guys. Appreciate that, and I'll be back again soon to discuss something else.